All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have two really awesome things left in our program for SSDP 2014. And I'm really, as much as we are all feeling the effects, I'm sure, of 2 solid days of conference, really excited, as should you be, about the things coming up with our closing ceremonies. But before that, we have the great pleasure of hearing from Neill Franklin. Neill, yeah, go ahead. This man deserves a tremendous amount of applause, that's for sure. Neill is the co-founder of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, one of the, I think, most interesting set of credible witnesses against the war on drugs that exists out there. And LEAP and SSDP share something pretty special, which is that we pull together a unique group of people to talk about why the drug war needs to end. And we pull together unique groups of particularly credible witnesses. The way that they have managed to spread their message through spokespeople across the country has been amazing. And I'm sure that all of you know that many LEAP speakers are available to come to speak on your campuses. And not only that, if your school offers an honorarium, LEAP very generously gives 25% of that honorarium back to SSDP. So, I cannot recommend any more highly getting some LEAP speakers, and if you can land this one, then that is very lucky. Ladies and gentlemen, my friend and colleague and a man with whom I have a great deal, for whom I have a great deal of respect, Neill Franklin.
So, how are you enjoying the conference so far? Kind of a shame it has to end, at least this year, right? Speaking of some things, the leadership of your organization, SSDP, obviously Aaron Houston was undoubtedly a great leader. What do you think about your new leader? What do you think about Betty? So what do you think? Huh? Good job? Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. All right. I'm going to try using a little technology today. It's probably not as elaborate and fun-filled as some of you young people are used to, putting things together. You got to remember, I'm in my 50s. This technology thing, I'm still working on, so bear with me on this. So how much time do I have, Betty?
Half an hour.
Oh, great, because
We can do some Q&A too.
Okay,
or
great.
Or you can take a shorter period of time. You can do whatever you want.
Well, because I guess some of you know that I really like to talk. What can I say? Police officers, cops like to talk. Sometimes we talk ourselves into trouble. My brother's my pastor, and I got a little bit of that in me, so, you got to watch out for that, sometimes. But, so that's good. And so we're going to talk about some things, obviously. I have a very, I'm going to give a very quick synopsis of me and LEAP, because in the past when I have talked to the groups of people, sometimes I breeze through that and I forget to tell people why I do this work, especially as someone from the law enforcement community, as a retired cop. Why do I do this work? I mean, that's a little strange in and of itself. And I'll talk just briefly also about LEAP, just in case there are people in the room who don't know about LEAP or know where, and for those that do, know where we are now as an organization. You know, it's very important. So, I'm also going to talk about, just so you'll know what to expect here, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Global Commission report, the recent report that just came out this month, or that they just officially released this month, regarding pathways to drug policies at work. Are anyone familiar with that report, by any chance? Some of you? Okay. For those of you that haven't read it, I encourage you to. I think it's wonderful. And you'll see why. So I figured many people may not have read it, so we're gonna talk about that a little bit. I pulled some pieces from that report to show you as well as talk to you about. And then we're going to talk about maybe some next steps, you know, immediate next steps and maybe a little bit further down the road. So, my story, and everybody has a story. Many of you have a story as to why you do this work, why you're involved with SSDP. And if you're not sharing that story with others, as you meet other people and you talk about this movement to reform our drug policies, if you're not telling your story, you're missing a very powerful moment that is critical to bringing someone from where they are to where you are. And many times you'll find out that they have a story too, but they don't realize it. We all live the drug war in some size, shape, or form. So remember to tell your story as to why you do this very important work. All right, so I've been a cop for almost 34 years before I gave it up to be the Director of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. And I started in the late 70s with the Maryland State Police. I worked undercover. I made a lot of arrests. Most of where I worked undercover was in the southern Maryland area. For those of you who are familiar with Calvert County, Charles County, St. Mary's County. And what was that? Whoop. Who's that? Where are you from?
It's me.
Oh, a great SSDPer who is now on LEAP staff. So you'll be hearing a lot from her, other than woo. So, in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, also did some work in Baltimore City with some of the major drug cases we had there back then. And then throughout my career, I made it through the ranks. I get promoted, and I ended up commanding drug task forces beginning in the western part of the state, from Howard County west. I think it was like 7 counties on that assignment as a lieutenant, and then I ended up on having the eastern half of the state for both criminal and drug enforcement, and I had 9 counties, 9 drug task forces, and some other criminal task forces there. And so now I was in charge of state troopers and small town police departments and some DEA agents, not just making a few hundred arrests for drug crimes, but thousands of arrests in the state of Maryland. And not only did we make drug arrests, well, first of all, most of those arrests we made by far were for marijuana, folks. Simple possession. As we try to what we call spin people, right? Turn them into informants, or what is the name on the street? Snitches, right? So as we try to turn them, we arrest them for marijuana possession, put the fear of God in them, okay? And then get them to tell us who they bought their pot from, or And in some cases, we put them in very dangerous scenarios and situations as we try to get them to work for us. And I think some of you may have heard about some of the horror stories behind getting informants, young informants, inexperienced informants to do undercover police work. And it's a very dangerous thing to do, and people have been hurt and in some cases murdered. We also became very good at taking your property. Civil asset forfeiture. Thank you, Ronald Reagan. It brought a lot of money into law enforcement back then, and it brings more money into law enforcement today. Taking your cash, your cars, in many cases your homes or farm, if you happen to be growing marijuana on your farm, and turning those proceeds into resources to be used by police departments to further the disastrous war on drugs, which is war on people. War on people. You can't have a war on this table. You can't have a war against that cup. You can only have wars against other people. And that's where we ended up. So I ended up as the head of training for the Maryland State Police and retired from there officially in 1999, and then went on to work for the Baltimore Police Department as a head of training for about 4 years. And during that time, actually immediately after I retired from the Maryland State Police, in less than a year, that's when I had my watershed moment. That's when I had that life-changing experience that caused me to look at all of this in a different way. In October of 2000, a good friend of mine, Ed Totley, was working undercover for the Maryland State Police, which he had done for many, many years. Too many years, actually. And he was working on a Safe Streets campaign in the Washington, D.C. area with the FBI on a task force. And he was buying cocaine from a mid-level drug dealer. And he had bought cocaine from this person before, thought he had developed some level of trust. But let me tell you something, folks, in this business of an illicit drug market, it's not a hell of a whole lot of trust going around, okay? Especially when money, a lot of money, is the motivation behind it all. And you get as much as you can as quickly as you can. So as we were orchestrating the final buy of cocaine from this individual, Ed had driven to the location, and this was going to be the final buy. They had a takedown team ready to make the arrest. And when the person came back from out of the house, supposedly where he was getting the cocaine, he paused for a short moment and then just reached over and shot Ed at point blank range in the side of the head, just like that. And so that night at the hospital, Prince George's General Hospital, where family and many friends and police officers had gathered, literally it was just hundreds of people, because he was well known, he was very well liked. Most cops, you could hear the anger and hear them talking about how they were going to go back out into the streets and push harder than ever before, arrest as many people as they could. It didn't matter whether they were dealing drugs, whether they were just possessing drugs, whether they were addicted to drugs. It didn't matter what the scenario was. They were just going to go out and knock the crap out of it. And many of them did. Many of them still do. But some of us started questioning what was happening. We started primarily looking at the violence that surrounds this illicit market. And we knew of other police officers that had died, who were killed in similar circumstances. Marty Ward from Baltimore City, when I was working undercover back in the early 80s. And The murder of Marty Ward was actually very, very instrumental in Mayor Kurt Schmoke. Familiar with Mayor Kurt Schmoke, by any chance? Yeah, from Baltimore City, who was, the one that said these drug policies don't work. Now, he said this back in the 1980s, these drug policies don't work. We need to figure out a different way because of the violence and the disease. That murder of Marty Ward was very instrumental in Mayor Schmoke taking a different look at this and being bold and stepping out as the leader of a major city and saying, hey, it doesn't work. 2 years after I started working for Baltimore City and after Ed's murder, the Dawson family of 7 was murdered in Baltimore by one drug dealer in the same month, October, 2 years later. You hear time and time again, we the police, we want you, the citizens, to work with us. We can get rid of all these criminals and gangs on these street corners selling drugs to our kids. We can do it. We know we can't do that because we just create job openings for kids to come into a very violent environment. But we tell you we can do it. We just made another big bust of heroin in Baltimore a few days ago. And there are people who actually think it's going to make a hell of a difference. It's not going to make any difference other than create job opportunities for others to fight for with guns in our streets. The Dawson family, the mother Angela, was doing what we wanted her to do. She was working with the police to get this drug crew off of the corner in front of her home because she had 5 children that she wanted to protect. And the boys in that family, her fear wasn't them becoming addicted to drugs. Her fear was them being recruited by that crew or another crew into the drug game. Because those young people know that once they're in that game, their life expectancy goes from here to here, quick. And very seldom is there a way out. That was her fear. So she was working with us. The head of that crew found out about it, and he wanted to send a message, as they do, to put fear into the hearts of the people in those communities so that they don't work with the police. His message was setting their home on fire early one morning, and he killed the entire family. It was this violence that drew my attention to it. And I started speaking out. But I started speaking formally in 2008 when I actually joined LEAP. And it's been a very, very interesting and exciting and very important ride ever since. That is what motivated me, the violence. But boy, were my eyes open. Wow, because now I see mass incarceration. I see the link to racial profiling. I see militarization of our police department. I see corruption. I see the financial cost, which should be going to education and treatment. But no, cops, courtrooms, and prisons. At every turn, every day, I'm learning something else. I've even learned that marijuana is not the devil's weed. Didn't always believe that. You know, and psychedelics. Wow, I was taught that psychedelics were worse than the devil's weed, were the worst thing out there. But then I meet people. Now I'm meeting people. I'm meeting real people. I'm out of that circle of cops, you know. I'm meeting real people. Eric and I have talks all the time. And who knows, maybe one day he'll be my trip counselor. Yeah. Not yet. One day. So anyway, I'm learning what everyone should be learning. I'm learning what more cops need to learn. what more prosecutors need to learn, more judges. And that's what LEAP is about. Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. It's a cool name. It's a cool name. But I like your name better. Students for Sensible Drug Policy. And I'll get to that in a second, the importance of your name. But LEAP is now, I mean, which started with 5 cops in 2002, has now grown to over 150,000 supporters globally, and thousands upon thousands of those people are law enforcement folks. You know, yeah. We have branches. Just like you guys, we have branches outside of the U.S. Okay, we have Canada, Brazil, New Zealand. We're trying to formalize New Zealand. We just formalized Costa Rica. And most of those members down there are active law enforcement folks. Yeah. We have a great hub over in Europe. It's doing well under the leadership of Annie Machon. And we're growing. And our Speakers Bureau, for those of you that know, we have that wonderful Speakers Bureau, and that's what they do. I mean, that's what LEAP is all about. You know, this very unique place of law enforcement, you know, cops, judges, corrections officials, DEA agents, federal marshals, and so on, who were once on the front lines of the war on drugs, but now speaking against it and advocating for change. You know, so, and we love partnering with all these other wonderful organizations because that's what it takes to get this job done. And that's why we love partnering with SSDP. I just like young people. Nothing against you, Eric. And Duke, I love young people too. And Duke, wherever you are.
Some of us, you look pretty young.
So yeah. So anyway, that's the down and dirty of why I do this work and a little bit about LEAP and where we are and what we're doing. Now, I want to talk about this name first. Students for Sensible Drug Policy, you know, which in my opinion is the most important drug policy reform organization. Did I actually say that more important than LEAP? Yes, I did, and I know someone's recording this, but anyway. I mean, you know, all right, look at your name. It tells, and there's so much important about a name. For instance, it tells everyone else who you are, your students. And typically that means young people. And it tells me what you are for. You are for sensible drug policy. And what can people reasonably assume from your name, other than those two things? Well, if there's an organization of young folks, a lot of young folks advocating for sensible drug policy, does this mean that our current policies are not sensible?
Yes.
Absolutely. And that's what most people are going to assume. I think most people can figure that out. If not, what? And so when you think about that, so if our drug policies aren't sensible, then that means they're like unreasonable, they're problematic. It leads people to ponder, then I guess we have problems with our drug policies. If so many people, these young people are saying that we need sensible drug policies. Well, yeah. That's the importance of a name and your name, and it should, immediately people should understand who you are and what you're about. So I don't know who was responsible for the name, but Eric, you may know, but great job. Great work. It's a name that you'll never have to change. So that means as long as you stay students. And I know we probably have some career students in here, but anyway, that's another talk. And there's nothing wrong. Well, actually, you should be lifelong students. We all should be, but you know what I mean in a formal sense. So let's move on to this here. And this is the Global Commission's report, Taking Control: Pathways to Policies That Work. Now, again, like I said, I encourage you to read it. I encourage you, first of all, this is yours. This doesn't belong to the Global Commission. This is yours. It is everyone's report. I encourage you to read it, to study it, to share it, to discuss it over and over again. I believe this is our roadmap to sensible drug policy. And sensible policies are policies that work to the advantage, not the detriment, of all people. All people. So why do I refer to it as yours? Of course, specifically Students for Sensible Drug Policies. And this is why I think you're the most important organization doing this work, because, and I don't mean for this to sound cliche, but you guys are going to be on Capitol Hill tomorrow. Some of you are going to be visiting offices that you will probably one day be sitting in, not as a staffer, but as a congressman and woman. As a senator. Some of you will be wearing robes in our courthouses. Hopefully not bathrobes, but you know, the ones, the black robes, sitting up high, looking down on the rest of us. Some of you will be attorneys, advocating and fighting for the rights of people. Some of you will be prosecutors, hopefully with a docket of crimes that are of people hurting other people. And of course, that's another discussion too, because believe it or not, I'm kind of like now moving towards prison abolition. I'm not there yet, but I'm at the restorative justice step right now, okay? So I just want to make that clear. I'm getting there. Right now, I still believe that there are some people who need time out, all right? So I'm working on it. But you are those people who are going to be, you know, the primary ones working on this movement of changing these drug policies. See, this isn't going to happen overnight. And, you know, some of us older ones here, we're probably not going to be here, you know, when there is significant change. I don't know, maybe not, I don't know. But what I'm saying is, you're the ones that are going to be in the key positions within the next 5, 10, 15 years to keep this. And it probably will evolve, but for the most part, to keep our plan for moving forward alive. That's why you're so important to this. That's why it belongs to you. So let me just say something here. Okay. You have already proven the ability to move policy. And what do I mean by that? I'm talking about Colorado and I'm talking about Washington State. Come on, give yourselves a hand. I don't know if have some of you seen this? This poll that was done a couple years back after the elections in Washington State and Colorado. It's 8 categories of people who were, you know, in this poll, when the voters were asked who were most influential in moving, in getting you to vote for this policy. and this is of Washington State and Colorado, Washington State's at the top, where you didn't do a lot of work in there, but you did some work. But you're number you're number 3 from the top. In Colorado, where I know you guys did a ton of work, you hit the phones, you talked to probably just about everybody in that state. You're number 1 by a large margin. So, let's breeze through this plan I'm talking about from the Global Commission just real quick. I just have a couple of quotes, and my time is running short, so let's go through these quotes. Now, this is by former president of Brazil, Fernando Cardoso, and just quickly he says, our report does not offer the definitive solution. Rather, it provides a roadmap. See, there is a roadmap for pragmatic policy change we think will make drug-related problems that the world faces today much more manageable. This Global Commission is just made up of just wonderful people, wonderful world leaders who have had that watershed moment already, and they're now doing what they should be doing to change this. Another quote about human rights, and this is extremely important. It's really going to be important for 2016 UNGAS in the United Nations. Punitive approaches to drug policy are severely undermined. They severely undermine human rights in every region of the world. They lead to the erosion of civil liberties and fair trial standards, the stigmatization of individuals and groups, particularly women, young people, and ethnic minorities, and the imposition of abuse and inhumane punishments. Human rights is critical to changing this policy and letting people know that. Here's one of my favorites, and not that I like crime, I'm just saying, because this is what brought me here. Fueling crime and enriching criminals. Rather than reduce crime, enforcement-based drug policy actively fuels it. Spiraling illicit drug prices provide a profit motive, which I mentioned earlier, for criminal groups to enter the trade and drive some people who are dependent on drugs to commit crime in order to fund their use. World Health Organization has a quote in this policy, in this report. Countries should work towards developing policies and laws that decriminalize injection and other use of drugs, and thereby reduce incarceration. Countries should work towards developing policies and laws that decriminalize the use of clean needles and syringes, and that permits NSPs that legalize, and I'm sorry for using these acronyms and stuff. Basically, we're talking about safe injection for the most part, clean needles and safe injection. For people who are opiate dependent, countries should ban compulsory treatment for people who use and/or inject drugs. Drug courts, folks, pretty much what they're saying. So as we begin to go forward, here's what they're saying. Putting health and community safety first requires a fundamental reorientation of policy priorities and resources, from failed punitive enforcement to proven health and social interventions. Ensure equitable access to essential medicines, in particular opiate-based medications for pain. See, this is all about education, folks, not criminalization. Education. Stop criminalizing people for drug use and possession, and stop imprisoning compulsory treatment on people whose only defense is drug use or possession. Rely on alternatives to incarceration for nonviolent, low-level participants in illicit drug markets, such as farmers, couriers, which we refer to as mules, that's what they call them, and others involved in the production, transport, and sale of illicit drugs. God, this is good stuff. Focus on reducing the power of criminal organizations as well as the violence and insecurity that result from their competition with both one another and the state. And as we get to the end here, allow and encourage diverse experiments in legally regulated markets in currently illicit drugs, beginning with, but not limited to, cannabis, coca leaf, and certain novel psychoactive substances. They use the word legal here. Like in the legalization, let me tell you folks, in this report, they use the word legal and legalization a few times. But here's what I advise you to do. Always make sure it has its partner with it, regulation. Regulation. Because then most people will know exactly what you're talking about. But the word legalization by itself just leaves too much open. Take advantage of the opportunity presented, I love this, presented by the upcoming UNGAS in 2016 to reform the global drug policy regime. And so, with that, as I wrap it up, next steps. Tomorrow you're going to be on Capitol Hill. And I'm going to come back to this in a second, but tomorrow you're going to be on Capitol Hill. That is in the very near future next step. And I know you're going to be advocating for smarter sentencing. You're going to be advocating for the Respect to State Marijuana Laws Act, HR 1523. And in the future, you're going to be lobbying for a whole lot more on Capitol Hill and your state capitals. You know, local government is also a place that needs a lot of work. So in your towns, in your counties, in your cities, when you go back home, what you have learned here not today, but yeah, today, yesterday, and the day before, and what you're going to learn tomorrow, you need to take that home and you need to put it to work. Put it to work with everyone that you know. You'd be surprised who you know that might know a policymaker. 2016 in UNGAS. The next 2 years will be a watershed moment for this movement. It's already been pretty busy, but the next 2 years are going to be critical. Maintaining the momentum that we have built over the past few years is absolutely critical to this movement. And you, SSDP, is critical to the momentum. Do you understand the importance of momentum? Any physics majors in here? None? Thank you, Aaron. See Aaron. He'll tell you about the importance of momentum and how difficult it is to stop something that has significant momentum. So the real work begins tomorrow with the lobbying, educating, micro movements, and movement building. Partnerships will be critical within the next 2 years and beyond. So it's important that we continue to partner with the other organizations, DPA, MPP, Normal, and I always get in trouble when I start naming organizations, but hopefully I don't forget anybody, but you know what I mean. For all the ones that I don't have time to mention, because there are many, those two. Partner as individuals, continue to partner, Betty, as I know you will, as an organization. And folks, God, I love you guys so much. Let's go kick some ass.